He was so small that one would wonder how he would survive in this big world without parents or a means of survival. He was so dirty that one would wonder if he took his bath in 2 weeks. Regardless of this, though, one can't but see the happiness in this boy, and one can't but wish it continues. This story began in Shika, an area in Zaria, Kaduna State. Shika lies on the axis of Giwa and Sabongeri local government area of Kaduna State. Shika does not have companies or places of great attraction except the teaching hospital. Just one teaching hospital. The teaching hospital is located in front of an express road that leads to Sokoto. Along this road are traders and houses of all sorts. The streets are gently laid out and the roads are properly tarred. The temperature, like most places in Kaduna State, is harsh, and the heat from the sun extends till nightfall. It was on one of those nights I met him. The sun was far gone, and the night cold was trying to creep down the sky, but the heat of the sun could still be felt in the wind. A group of boys who seemed to be within the ages of 8 to 12 years old were gathered beside the road. They were dirty, perhaps smelling, for they were in tattered and dirty clothing, holding a bowl each. They were arguing among themselves, speaking Hausa loudly and fluently. Almajiri, yes, Almajiri is the general term used to address them. Almajiri are small boys between the ages of 2 to 8. However, we hardly come across the elderly ones because many of them would have joined the trailers to big cities. Some would have become manual laborers, traders, or have died. In northern Nigeria, the main work of an Almajiri is to beg for alms. They sometimes take small work in the markets or anywhere they can find one. However, they're popularly known for begging. You might wonder where the idea of Almajiri came from. There are several explanations to their existence. Culturally, some Hausas believe a male child should not grow in the same house with his mother and sisters. The word Almajiri is derived from the Arabic term al-muhajir, which means migrants. Some have argued that religiously parents should leave parental responsibilities to Islamic schools. These male children are oftentimes taken to an Islamic scholar with no food, clothing, or a means of survival. As a result of this, these children go out on the streets and travel several kilometers to beg for what to eat and give to the Islamic scholars also. As a result of this, many of them with no time forget their homes and do not return. Shika, like other places in the northern part of Nigeria, also have Almajiris, and it was that fateful Monday night I met him. He was small and dark in complexion. His hair was curly. From observation, he could not be more than 3 or 4 years old. He had in his hand a small yellow bowl that is neatly covered and that attached to it a string whose work is to prevent the bowl from getting lost. He was not standing with a group of boys, but was not too far away from them. He was on the opposite side of the teaching hospital's main gate, mostly called Baban Gate, meaning big gate. He was sitting down on the ground, watching as cars plied the busy road. He seemed to be in his own world. I saw a glimpse of satisfaction in his eyes as he watched the road with such delight. After a few minutes of sitting, he stood and started jumping in amusement. But I do not know what made him so happy. As time rolled, he moved towards a man dressed in jalamiya. The man was holding a black nylon bag. The small boy stretched his hand towards the man, who behaved like he did not see him. The other boys were laughing at him, but the boy seemed not to notice. He moved towards the fruit stalls, but they were busy doing several things. Some of them were selling to hospital workers who seemed to be returning from work, while some were talking in front of these stalls, and some Almanjiris seated and a particular one sleeping. The small boy moved towards the sugarcane seller, who pretended not to notice his presence, but luck shined on this small boy, for the man eventually gave him a small piece of cane after carefully peeling the back of the juicy cane. After collecting it, the small boy opened his bowl, which appeared to be empty, and placed the sugar cane in it. The boy moved towards Afiz, a popular smoked meat seller, who was placing spiced and salted meat, or suya as it's mostly called in Nigeria, on the coal. The boy stood in front of his stall for minutes, watching him with a wanting look. At a point, he began to cough. Then he burst out in tears. His cry was so loud that it called the attention of the people around. At first, Hafiz did not pay attention to him, but when his cry became unbearable, he chased him away from the front of his stall, and the other boys burst into terrific laughter. Although he was just 3 or 4, no one felt sympathy for him. He moved towards the shop that had speakers placed in front of it, coughing and trying to swallow his cry. A fast Hausa song was coming out of the speaker in form of waves, but he seemed not interested in it. He sighted a woman in pink native attire and a white flowered patterned scarf who was buying suya from Hafiz and ran towards her. She laughed at the sight of him. He also gave a mild smile, and I guess they know each other. She dipped her hand into her bag and brought out a 20 naira note, which she gracefully handed over to him. From her speech, one could guess she's Yoruba, one of those Yorubas that have spent many years in the north. Upon receiving the money, the small boy started dancing to the music that came out from the speakers, and it was a show to watch. Everyone started laughing. Even the woman laughed as she left the stall of the meat seller. The other boys that at the very beginning were making fun of him came close and started clapping in unison, for a really cool dance. He was so small that one would wonder how he would survive this big world without parents or a means of survival. He was so dirty that one would wonder if he took his baths in 2 weeks. Regardless of this, though, one can't but see the happiness in this boy, and one can't but wish it continues. However, nature seemed not content with the happiness or the dance of this boy, for as he was dancing, the atmosphere began to change. But people kept on laughing and speaking out loud in Hausa. I guess they were commenting on his dance. The other boys were still clapping and dancing, that your mind would wonder what is making them so happy, for some of them might have not taken a meal all through the day. They do not plan to be doctors, lawyers or engineers. All they care about is surviving the day and waiting for the morrow, hoping it will be better than today. As we were dancing, the wind started blowing hard and everywhere was cold. The sky was filled with such darkness that the stars were nowhere to be found. It was the rain. It was about to fall. In minutes, the stall owners started packing their goods and everyone headed for home. Even the boys were nowhere to be found. But the small boy was still out alone. He seems disappointed that the song was gone, that the speakers were already disconnected and packed into the shops. I guess he wanted to dance some more. He picked the sugarcane from his bowl and tried to chew it, though it was obvious it was difficult for him to chew. He, regardless of this, tried to. As this enterprise of his continued, the rain began to fall. He ran in the little pace he could go, but he did not go far when he fell flat on the street. He gave out a sharp, loud cry. He picked up his bowl and sugarcane, walked down the street leaping on a foot. His clothes were soaked, his eyes were red, and all of a sudden, he stopped walking, knelt on the ground, and started drawing patterns on the ground. He seemed to find pleasure in what he was doing. I guess he was drawing Arabic letters, but I can't be so sure. One thing is, he found pleasure in it, and though nature took over his night, culture took away his choice, and life seemed to have taken away his future, he found pleasure in his presence. Even the devil would be too unfair if he tried to take that away from him. He spent minutes enjoying this enterprise, but he stood up eventually, walked to a shed made in front of a hut, and laid quietly beside goats. I do not think that's the first time he will be sleeping there, because the goats did not act surprised. They did not try to move. He was on the ground as the rain continued falling. He placed the half-consumed sugarcane back in his bowl, began beating the bowl, but he suddenly stopped and gave a big cough. This continued for minutes. He was out in the cold. How will he survive the night with no bed or cover clothes? How will he sleep when he coughs at intervals? As this went on, the rain stopped. He sat up and started crying. I guess he was hungry, maybe the cold. It could also be due to the cough. The only surprising thing is that the occupants of the house did not respond. He laid back on the ground, closing his eye, tried to sleep, and after a long battle with all these forces of nature, he finally slept. Early on Tuesday morning, he rose from the shed with a long cough. The friendly ray of the morning sun was down. His clothes were damp, and in front of him was an almondjiri who could not be more than 10 years old. The older boy dragged him up. It was obvious the small boy was smelling due to the urine of the goats that seemed to be all over his body. He did not notice the feces that stained his head. Rather, he gave his hand to the older boy. The older boy dragged him to a provision stall owned by Issa. Everyone knows Issa to be a nice storekeeper. At the sight of the boys, he said, "Sadiq." The older boy replied, at hearing his name being mentioned. Issa brought out a bucket of water and gave the small boy a clean bath. After this, Sadiq brought out a neat piece of clothes that seemed fitting. The small boy was coughing as this activity was going on. After his bath, he picked his ball again and followed Sadiq to the road. He gave out a smile as he leaped joyfully along the road. That could be seen looking at him with smiles on his face. The small boy left Sadiq and moved towards the group of boys, but they did not notice his presence. He watched as cars moved in and out of the hospital gate. He watched neatly dressed people walk into the hospital. He moved to Sadiq, tapped him, and pointed to the front of the hospital. Sadiq understood what he was trying to explain. He held his hand as they both crossed to the other side of the road. He walked up to people as they were heading to the hospital. He stretched his hands, but no one paid attention to him, and he continued coughing as he begged. He kept doing this for minutes until the heat of the sun became unbearable. He went to the store, stood in front of the sugarcane seller, who seemed not to be in a good mood. After minutes of waiting in vain, he started crying again. The intensity of the cry caught the attention of passengers in the bus going to Zamaru. As he wept, he stretched his hand to a Hausa woman in the bus, who replied harshly to him. The boy did not say a word. No one has ever heard him speak because he was mute. A young man on the bus brought out 10 naira from a pile of money he has in his purse and handed it over to him. Another woman reached into her purse and wanted to give him 15 naira, but she was stopped by the man. He told her in pidgin English not to give him more than 10 naira, else he would expect her to give him 15 naira the day that follows. And if she did not, he would ask why she did not give him 15 naira. The fact is, this small boy was not the kind of boy. He was mute. However, you can't blame the young man. Other tribes are scared of Almanjiri. They are believed to be wicked, and they never care about those that help them. For in times of religious crisis and riots, they would be the ones to point out the house of Christians and non-indigents. After the man told her not to give him 15 naira, the woman instead of gave him 20 naira. He was so happy, but he did not dance. He moved to the woman selling tuwo and bought himself one. The cough was getting out of hand. It was obvious he was in pain and discomfort. The cough became persistent, but no one noticed. The discomfort was huge that he held his tummy as he gave it out in blows, and at the point he vomited all he ate. He sat down on the floor and continued coughing for minutes. After a few minutes, the group of boys walked up to him while Sadiq pulled him up and he reluctantly followed them. His eyeballs were red and his spit was dripping down his lip. He tapped Sadiq and pointed to his stomach. But Sadiq did not understand. I guess he misunderstood the complaints for hunger. They moved into the teaching hospital, which seemed similar to other government hospitals. There were flowers, shops carefully lined beside the road, and the neatness of the environment and people in it made the boys look like aliens. As they entered the hospital, they proceeded with their works of begging. Some of them were lucky while the others were not. The small boy was part of the lucky ones. He was weak. I would love to guess that he was running on high temperature, but none of the boys noticed. It was possible they did, but were too busy with their jobs. He moved into the hospital building. As he was wandering in the hospital, he saw the Yoruba woman that gave him 20 naira notes the night before, coming out of her office, that had written on its door, "Pediatrician, childcare, our utmost priority." He moved towards her and held her clothes. At seeing him, she gently took his hands off her clothes. She was putting on a white lab coat, and behind the coat, the logo of UNICEF could be seen. She went to meet a woman dressed in satin lace, who was holding her daughter, who could be around the age of 7 or 9 years old. The doctor, in excitement, carried the girl and was playing with her as she took her into her office. The woman in lace followed behind, giving a fulfilling smile. I hope they remember that day, for it was the day they forgot their oaths and allowed sentiment to cloud their judgment. He kept on walking around the hospital till Sadiq came around and pulled his hand and dragged him out. The small boy kept following him like a younger brother. They trekked back to the main road, crossed the road and went their different ways. He moved to the stall of sugarcane seller, as he always does,
At seeing him, sugarcane seller gave him another piece of sugarcane. He gently took it and started chewing on it. As he was doing this, he passed by a shop that sells medicine, owned by Meka, a middle-aged Igbo man. The small boy stretched his hands to him, but Meka pretended like he did not see him. The small boy stood still, then he gave a blow of loud cough, which immediately got followed by vomit. When Meka saw this, he stood up angrily from his seat, stretched his hands to get a cane as he chased the boy from his store, making sure a stripe of the cane hit his back. The boy gave a huge cry as he ran away from his store. The Igbo man started shouting, speaking from the top of his voice in Hausa. The other boys started laughing, but the boy was in pain. He sat in front of his
stall with Sadiq till evening. Sadiq was singing a song in Hausa while he tried dancing as he sat. As this enterprise was going on, a truck carrying 2 cows parked in front of his stall. The owner of the car was a fat man. He was jovial and he spoke loudly. He gave the boys 20 naira notes each. As he was about to leave, he started speaking to the boys. I guess what he said was in Hausa. As soon as he finished speaking, Sadiq picked his ball, stood up and tried climbing into the back of the truck. At seeing this, the small boy ran towards him, held his clothes and started crying. The cry was so loud that I could guess what was about to happen. So Dick was going to Kano, and there was no assurance that he would come back. The other thing I did not understand was why he did not go with the boy. So Dick eventually entered the truck. The car moved out of the street and the small boy ran after the truck. So Dick was going, and in minutes he was no longer seen. No one can tell if he would be seen again if he will return to Shika. Or remember the small boy always helped to cross the road. After the car left, the small boy sat on the floor. He was weak, and the night was gradually coming. He moved to the side of the road, watched as cars plied the road. I guess he was waiting for the truck that took Sadiq to come back, but he did not. The small boy tried crossing the road to the other side. He was right in the middle when he slumped on the floor, right in the middle of the road, as if this misfortune was not enough. A Hilux, whose driver did not expect the boy to fall, ran over him in seconds. Shika went upside down. The car ran over his head, and the small boy did not survive it. His brain was out on the floor, and his blood on the road. The driver did not wait. He ran as fast as he could. The sugarcane seller was the first to run to the spot. He burst into tears as he shouted at the top of his voice. The name, Hassan. So the boy had a name. His name was Hassan. A group of women ran out from the hut whose shed they slept. One of the women ran to his body, carrying it and weeping. She was his mother. The sugarcane seller was his father, and that hut was his home. He would have still been alive if culture did not segregate him. Religious instructions were not misinterpreted, and his nation did not abandon him. If life was fair to him, perhaps he would grow up to be a performing artist, maybe a dancer. Will Sadiq believe it if he were told upon his arrival that the boy is dead? Would the goats remember to keep his pot empty? Issa could be seen in a corner, crying. If the country was not divided, he would have survived. Tomorrow, there might be another Lemanjiri in Shika. I doubt if his name will be Azan, if he will be mute, if he would love to dance or cry out loud when he needs something. He was not just one mute, he was human too. He was 4 years old, and he really tried to live. He had a name, and his name was Hassan. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, share, comment, and subscribe. I love you all. Thank you. Till next week when we meet again.